Hi, this is Gayatri. Welcome to my course on Patanjali Yoga Sutras. I'd like to begin with a prayer. Vande Gurunam Charanarabinde Sandarshita Swatma Sukhavabodhe Nishreyase Jangalikayamane Sansara Halahala Mohashanti Abahu Purushakaram Shankhachakra-sidharinam Sahasrashirasam Shvetam Pranamamim Patanjalim. Om. You'll find a detailed transliteration and translation of the prayer in the additional resources on the website. Now let's begin with the introduction to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Welcome to the course on a comparative study of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. In this course, we'll be looking at 6 bhashyas in a comparative format. Each lesson is going to explain one sutra as it is understood by each of the 6 gurus. Each sutra capsule is of or just under 20 minutes for easy listening and retention. You'll be able to take the course on our website and you'll have unlimited access if you're a member, where you'll be able to access the PDFs and any additional resources. You'll also be able to listen to parts of it on YouTube and as a podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. Those who access it via the website as a course, you'll be also invited to an open Q&A interactive session once a month where you can bring your questions. Now that the mundane stuff is done with, the masters or gurus whose bhashyas we'll be considering are of Maharishi Vedavyasa, who's translated by Sanskrit scholar Ganganath Jha, Swami Satyananda, Swami Vivekananda, B.K.S. Iyengar, Osho, and Barbara Stoller Miller. Of course, there are many more commentaries you could refer to. The more well-known ones being Sri Vachaspati Mishra, Sri Ramananda Saraswati, Sri Ramanujacharya, King Bhojadeva. However, these are the ones I have chosen to work with. And why? Because by the end, I hope that we'll have a strong view of both traditional and modern interpretations of the Yoga Sutras, such that we have an understanding of the range, scope, and breadth of the application and interpretation. So why should we do this? Why should we pick up 6 commentaries and compare them? Why can't we just pick up one and stick to it in letter and spirit? Well, there's an insightful line in B.K.S. Iyengar's commentary in which he points out that in the Yoga Sutras, the seer is the object of knowledge. Unlike, say, the Brahma Sutras, in which Brahman is the object of knowledge. And as such, Brahman being fixed and absolute, and the seer being mutable and individual. In this quest to find the seer and the doer, which is the self, the Yoga Sutras become a subjective art, philosophy, and science. As such, the Yoga Sutras are open to interpretation and are mutable, but within the framework of individual practice. There is a tendency in the modern world, as yoga spreads far and wide, and by now we have practitioners of yoga overseas who've from different cultures who've been at it more than 40-50 years. But there is a tendency to make yoga modular. You can go and do a 220-hour, 550-hour teacher training within a month, gain certification. You can claim to be an expert in Kundalini Yoga without accessing the spiritual foundations or the principles of yoga. And while it is true that even in the traditional form, yoga is a practice. Yoga is always a practice. It's not a theory. It's maybe 1% theory. Even so, there's a need to understand the theoretical framework inside which we may operate. Because there is one. And we cannot gain the mind of the yogi by discarding the framework. It's kind of like you've got to learn the grammar to become this kind of literary expert who discards grammar. You don't start by throwing out the punctuation marks. And the thing is, we seem to be doing that the other way around in everyday life. So the master's commentaries or bhashyas reinforce that framework for us. And the range of them, the fact that we can go from Swami Satyananda to Osho or to Barbara Stoller Miller, show us that there is still flexibility to the interpretations within the context of the discipline. So the masters or the bhashyas that I have chosen aim to create that range. Now, of all the bhashyas, there are introductions. I think Swami Vivekananda just, his introduction is more catered to a Western audience. So he's still sort of defensive about and justifying the need for the individual soul to reach the higher self. But I'm assuming that my audience is already convinced of that. So I'm skipping his introduction. I find the introductions of Swami Satyananda, B.K. Iyengar, Barbara Stoller Miller the most systematic, the most comprehensive in providing a context for the knowledge. Each goes into the definitions of the yoga and the categorizations. For instance, into Bahiranga or the external practices of yoga. That is Yama, the social code, Niyama, the personal code, Asana, the seating power, Pranayama, the control of prana or life force, Pratyahara, the sense withdrawal. And these prepare us for Antaranga, or the inner practices that are attained in the last 3 stages of yoga, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, that is concentration, meditation, and superconsciousness. So Swami Satyananda sees Patanjali's Yoga Sutra as a categorization within a larger framework of Raja Yoga. And this, to him, Raja Yoga includes Kundalini, Kriya, Mantra, Dhyana Yogas, and so on. Whereas others tend to see Patanjali's yoga as the same as Raja Yoga and equally inclusive of all of these. Swami Satyananda makes the distinction. The 8 limbs, he says, steady the 5 koshas. The Annamaya, the Pranamaya, the Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya koshas. Physical, pranic, mental, intuitive, and that which has the nature of bliss. Okay. So if we go deeper into these categorizations, the 5 yamas are Satya, Ahimsa, Asteya, Brahmacharya, and Aparigraha. That is truthfulness, non-violence, honesty, abstinence, non-possessiveness. And the 5 niyamas are Shaucha, Santosha, Tapas, Svadhyaya, and Ishvara Pramidana. That is cleanliness, contentment, austerity, self-study, and surrender. Between these two, the yamas create external equilibrium. The niyamas create internal equilibrium. And between them, they encompass the sum of our engagements with the world. They cover all our worldly activities. Basically, they cover our way of being. And Osho, in his commentary, says that even if you can recite the sutras backwards and forwards, if you can do all the asanas, you don't become a yogi by study alone. That is not who a yogi is. You have to be centered. You have to have gained the capacity to be. This way of being is what all the gurus speak of. And yoga is not about asana alone. It's about the capacity to have discipline, to become, which he says derives from the term becoming a disciple. And that is what in yoga gives you the capacity to be. Okay. And collectively, B.K. Iyengar says the Yoga Sutras come after Patanjali's study of grammar and Ayurveda. And these 3 together are known as the Moksha Sutras. So there is an inherent progression from lucidity of speech, which can only come from lucidity of thought, which can only come from clarity of mind, to health in the bodily form. And on that base, we can start using body and mind to reach yoga or communion, a state of oneness. Otherwise, what is it the yoga is of? Right? So when you study yoga, you understand the thing is, when you practice yoga, for instance, you just join a local class, you start doing the asanas, and it takes a lot out of you, but you're doing them and you're devoted to it. But it's only when you begin to study the theory, the commentaries, the bhashyas, that you understand there is a before and after. There's a breadth to yoga. There's an expansiveness to yoga. It is not just of body, it is also of mind. It is not just of mind, it is of the world. It is of our way of being in the world. There's a before, there's an after. And to B.K. Iyengar, the 4 padas coincide with the 4 ashramas of life, 4 stages of life. And also the 4 gunas, Rajas, Sattva, Tamas. So Barbara Stoller. So the thing is, as you read each of these commentaries, you understand that each guru focuses on aspects of this expansiveness. And between all of them, you find it expands into almost every state of being and every consideration of the world, of the mind, of the body. Barbara Stoller Miller defines yoga as that system which yokes one's consciousness to a spiritually liberating discipline. What Patanjali is doing, she says, is offering us the possibility of complete psychological transformation through the discipline of yoga. In the Indian view, the yogi is not passive. He's a spiritual hero. He's active and potent. And he has to be supra-rational. It is not that he's irrational. He's supra-rational. He goes beyond the senses and he goes beyond the mind. So, what exactly are the Yoga Sutras? What is its composition? There are 195 sutras of aphorisms. Each is concise, pithy, meaningful. It's very sparse. It's very sparsely written. And it's divided into 4 sections. Samadhi Pada, Sadhana Pada, Vibhuti Pada, Kaivalya Pada. The Samadhi Pada has 51 sutras. It instructs us on definition, practice, obstacles, concrete and abstract communion. The Sadhana Pada has 55 sutras. It deals with the kleshas or affliction. And it gives you an overview of the 8 limbs, but it has a focus on the first 3. Vibhuti Pada has 56 sutras and details the 5 remaining limbs and the development of siddhis or psychic powers. And Kaivalya Pada, which has 34 sutras, is the deployment of everything that you've attained from the study and practice of the previous 3 padas and directs it towards clarifying perception and attaining liberation. How are they composed? Swami Satyananda says Brahma or Hiranyagarbha is the formulator of the Yoga Sutras through the agency of the actor that Patanjali became in around the 4th century. Different people differ on dates. Typically, it's dated by the intersection with other texts and the presence of other practitioners such as the Buddha. Swami Satyananda isn't certain that Patanjali, who wrote the treatises on grammar on Ayurveda, is the same Patanjali who wrote the Yoga Sutras, whereas B.K. Iyengar is convinced of that fact. So you see, they differ on these aspects. But what Swami Satyananda says is the basis of the Yoga Sutras is a foundational Sankhya philosophy of sage Kapila. And he says it existed before the time of Gautama, the Buddha, who studied Sankhya Yoga in the ashram of Alarkala. And if you have a basic knowledge of Buddhism, he points out that you will be able to see the similarities between the Noble Eightfold Path and the Ashtanga of yoga. And most of the gurus agree that yoga existed in various forms well before sage Patanjali. And his role was more to gather all this knowledge and information, declutter it, and to make it one pithy text that is aphoristic and concise and practically usable by a student. Barbara Stoller Miller, in her introduction, tells a very interesting story of the origins of the Tantra of yoga. And the thing is, we often forget that yoga is a Tantra. It is a secret knowledge. And by secret knowledge, it doesn't mean that only some people should have access to it, but that access to it has to be earned by a student and permitted by a teacher based on the progress of the student. And it also has a strong feminine aspect to it. It is an aspect of Shakti. And so she tells a story in which the name of sage Patanjali is derived from a small newborn serpent that falls into the hands of his mother as she is offering worship to the sun. So she names him Patanjali, Pata meaning serpent, but also fallen, and Anjali meaning offering. And the sage Patanjali is born of a spiritually cognizant and aware woman, which suggests the tantric underpinnings of yoga. In Tantra, the norms of society are typically overturned to liberate practitioners from worldly constraints. And in this process, it releases locked energy. And this releasing of locked energy is the process and purpose of yoga. So, while each of the commentators focuses on different aspects, one aspect is more important. You'll find others don't even mention the tantra. Someone else may not mention the koshas or the gunas or the ashramas. Many differ on etymological interpretations, dates, historical origins, categorizations. You'll still find a strong resonance between each of them. That yoga existed before Patanjali, that he gathered this vast and fragmented knowledge, gave it concise shape and form. Even so, much of it still remains cryptic, pointing to its tantric nature, that knowledge can only be revealed by the initiation of a guru, even when the words and practices seem present and apparent, ripe for the picking. That yoga is common to Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, and they aim to free humanity from suffering. That yoga is to be practiced as a continuum, along with bhakti yoga, elevation through devotion, jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, karma yoga, right action in a worldly sense. And Swami Satyananda points out that having derived from the Sankhya philosophy of Purusha and Prakriti, Patanjali uses the term Viyoga. If yoga is communion, what is Viyoga? Viyoga is separation. Why is Patanjali talking about separation? This derives from the Sankhya underpinnings because in the Sankhya philosophy, beings are born out of the union of Purusha and Prakriti. And therefore, this deconstruction of samsara has to come from the separation of Purusha and Prakriti. So the end of yoga then becomes Viyoga. Yoga's origins, references, evolution can be traced through the Mahabharata, Rig Veda, Bhagavad Gita. In various Upanishads, Tejopanishad, Yoga Tattva, Yoga Chudamani, Varaha Upanishad, Darshana Upanishad. There are references of yoga throughout scriptural texts. So it's not possible to read all of them, but what it is sort of, or perhaps it is possible if you devote your life to it, and many do. But what it is possible to sort of at least begin to understand is that there is great freedom in the discipline of the pursuit of freedom. There's freedom to think, there's freedom to understand, there's freedom to practice, there's freedom to correct the practice, there's freedom to internalize the practice. And there are many, many ways in which you may fall off this wagon multiple times, as we all do, and still be able to pull yourself back to a process that moves you towards a healthier state of mind and body. So thus, as you can tell, the purpose of this course is to help a student understand that yoga is more than just exercise, posture, asana. As you know, my own Guruji puts it, a monkey can do asanas. Standing on your head doesn't make you a yogi. Nor does not being able to hold a part of your body not make you a yogi. Yoga is so much more, and it cannot be divorced from its philosophy or made modular and fragmented. That is going against the spirit by which the Yoga Sutras were created by Patanjali. It's a wholeness of understanding, pure perception, consciousness, practice, and being that a yogi aspires to. Thank you for listening to the introduction. I hope you'll also be able to listen to Sutra 1, which will be uploaded in a day. So have fun with it, and I hope to see you come back and access our website for the full course.